Node.js crash course. So I like to revamp these every few years or so. It's been about 3 years since the last Node.js crash course, and I'll go over what I'm going to cover in a few minutes, but I just want to say that this is for all skill levels because we're not using any frameworks like Express, and when you build an app or an API, 99% of the time you use a framework like Express or Fastify or Adonis or something like that, which really makes things easier and gives you the tools to create routes and add middleware and just makes things a lot easier. Now this video is much more low level, so we'll do things like create a server, explore the HTTP module as well as other core Node.js modules. So even if you have experience with, say, Node and Express, there's probably going to be some things here that you haven't really worked with. And if you're an absolute beginner, it's a good start to just learn Node by itself and know what it's capable of. All right, so sit back. I would suggest following along just because I think that you can learn a lot more that way, but if you want to just watch, that's fine as well. So we're going to just spend a couple minutes on some slides and then we'll jump right into the code. Okay guys, so before we get started, let's define what Node.js actually is. So many absolute beginners think that Node.js is some kind of framework or library or even a language, but it's not. It's a JavaScript runtime, and a runtime is a program or an environment that runs other programs. So we can build JavaScript applications and run them right on your computer or right on the server. Now, Node.js was built with C++, and it uses the powerful V8 JavaScript engine that's also used with the Google Chrome web browser. Node.js can be used for a lot of things, but it's mostly used for developing server-side and networking applications, APIs, microservices. It essentially allows you to use JavaScript to write server-side code and do a lot of the same things you would do with Python or PHP or C# and other server-side languages. Now, traditionally, JavaScript was only used on the client side in the web browser to do things like form validation, animation, small stuff like that. But with Node.js, JavaScript has really become a truly powerful full-stack language. And again, you can do a lot of the same things you can do with other server-side languages. And there are actually other JavaScript runtimes such as Deno and Bun.js, and those are really cool to explore. They're much newer technologies, but they don't really have a space in the industry yet. So I would definitely suggest starting with Node.js. I would never suggest that someone start with something like Bun.js or Deno, just because it's so new, and you're most likely not going to find jobs using those technologies just yet. There's also not really a large community or support for them either. So Node.js is very fast and scalable due to its architecture and the V8 engine. It's also pretty popular. I think it's something like 6.3 million websites use Node.js, and it's used by companies like Netflix, Uber, LinkedIn. And in addition to really large companies, Node is also a really popular option for startups and smaller projects as well. Now, I just want to quickly go over what we're going to cover in this course and kind of the order we're going to do it in. So, of course, we're talking about now what Node.js is. I'll talk a little bit about how it works under the hood as well. We're going to install it, set up a project, set up the package.json, which is kind of like a manifest file. We're going to look at some custom modules, which are basically just files that we can create, and we can import and export functions and data from those files to and from those files. And there's really two module systems that we can use. There's CommonJS, which is kind of Node.js's native system, and then you can also use ES modules, which is the import syntax that you use with React, Vue, and all the front-end JavaScript stuff. So I'm going to show you both, but ultimately we're going to stick with ES modules. That's just what I prefer. It's more modern. Now, when it comes to the core modules that Node includes, I think the HTTP module is one of the most important to kind of understand when you're getting started. And this is what allows you to create a server and accept requests and give responses. So a big part of this tutorial will be using the HTTP module. Now, in real life, like I said earlier, you'd probably use something like Express, which is a web framework that makes things much easier. And I'm also going to be revamping my Express crash course as well. But Express uses or sits on top of the HTTP module. So it's good to know how this works and how to accept requests, how to work with them, how to send responses back, send JSON back, and deal with HTTP headers and methods and all that stuff. So that's really what we're going to cover in this course, or in that part of the course. We're even going to look at some custom middleware, which are functions that sit between incoming requests and outgoing responses. Now, when it comes to some of the other core modules, we're going to be going over those in the second part of the course. So the file system module, path module, URL, events, things like that. So I'll cover the basics of all those as well. Now, one common mistake that I see people do is jump to Node.js too quickly. Before learning Node.js, you should have a good understanding of JavaScript. So, of course, you should know all the fundamentals, variables, functions, loops, objects, classes. You should have a good understanding of that stuff, most definitely. Now, I'd also suggest that you understand asynchronous programming, so you should know things like callbacks, promises, the async await syntax. Chances are you'll be building web applications and JSON APIs with Node.js, so you should understand how HTTP works, the request response cycle. You should know about HTTP methods like get, post, put, delete. You should know the common status codes, 200, 404, 500, things like that. And you will be learning more about this stuff as you learn about Node.js, and even in this very video. Now, you probably are coming from front-end JavaScript, so you've probably worked with APIs, JSON APIs. You've probably consumed them. Well, now you're going to be creating them most likely. So it helps if you already have a basic understanding of how they work. Like I said, HTTP methods and status codes and all that. And then NPM, the Node Package Manager, you probably have some experience with. I mean, if you're using React or any front-end framework, you're usually installing that stuff with NPM, so you probably have an idea. But you will also learn about NPM and package.json and stuff in this video. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how Node.js works. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because I want this to be practical and easily digestible, but you should have a basic idea of how Node works under the hood. So as I said, Node is built on top of the V8 JavaScript engine, which is the same engine that powers Google Chrome. Other browsers have their own engines, like Firefox has SpiderMonkey, Safari has JavaScript Core. The V8 engine is written in C++, and it's what takes your JavaScript code and converts it into machine code so that your computer can understand. And Node has taken this engine and extended it to work on the server side. Now, Node.js is what we call non-blocking, which means that it doesn't wait around for I/O operations, which are input-output operations. And those are things like network calls, file system operations, database operations. And instead of blocking the execution of code while waiting for these things to happen or these things to complete, Node.js uses events and callbacks, and this allows it to handle thousands of connections at the same time. And this is why Node.js is so fast and efficient. Now, in Node.js, there's a single main thread that executes your JavaScript code, and you can think of a thread as a set of instructions that your computer executes. And in a single-threaded environment, there's only one set of its instructions that are executed at a time. This is different from multi-threaded environments where you have multiple threads that can execute different parts of your code simultaneously. So Node.js uses something called the event loop, which is a mechanism that allows Node to perform non-blocking I/O operations. And when you make a network request, for example, Node.js doesn't wait for that request to complete. Instead, it continues to execute the rest of your code. And when that request